What's up, everybody? Welcome to the FanMouth NFL Daily Breakdown. I'm Jeff. Dave and Joe are here with me to give you our analysis. Let's jump into quarterbacks here. Dave, who's the big quarterback play this week? Tell me Peyton Manning.
Well, that's the big quarterback. I'm not someone who likes to spend a lot of money on the quarterback position, but I think you have to this week. I think he's easily the best play on the board this week among the quarterbacks. I mean, if you're just looking at the competition, the next four guys in most leagues, salary-wise, are playing in the are going to be playing in the rain. Now, this is not going to be a big weather week like last week, I don't think. But who would Manning in the sunshine, the next four highest guys in the rain, I just think gives them maybe a little bit more of an edge. And yeah, it's one of those things where you look at the salaries, you say, Manning's going to have to throw one more touchdown pass or maybe 1.5 more than some of these guys. I think that's easily projectable here against the San Diego team that he had a 30-plus point game against last time they were at home against them. I just think he's easily projectable for 30 points here.
I actually agree with you this week, Dave. What do you think, Joe?
I'm saving a bit of money at quarterback. I've got a couple good options. Tom Brady is one. Obviously, Indy's defense is coming off giving up 378 yards and 4 touchdowns to Alex Smith. I think that could be a high-scoring game. I could see Brady doing well. Also, Rivers. I mean, I think that game's going to be closer than anybody thinks. I think he has got a good shot to match Peyton for much cheaper.
Okay, I agree with Rivers to an extent. He's a little scary because he didn't really put up good fantasy games against the Broncos in the regular season, but this game is projected to be 10 points higher scoring than those games actually were. So there's a little bit of bonus there, but with Tom Brady, explain that one to me, because with Gronk, he is just a completely different quarterback, and he's not very good, in my opinion, as far as a fantasy option goes. So
right.
Are you concerned about Gronk at all? I mean, or is it the fact that Amendola and all them are all healthy now?
I just think, I think this is going to be another high-scoring game. I mean, the over/under is 51.5. Indy's not a good defensive team. They're going to score points. The Patriots are going to score points. I think this is going to be a big offensive game.
And with the Kansas City game, you mentioned that. I think the thing to note there also is that Kansas City lost their running back. So actually their top 2 running backs in the game. So they had no other choice but to pass. So I think those numbers are a little inflated. I do see your point, but I don't know. I'm a little scared away from Brady, but I can buy onto Rivers on the in the lineups that I'm trying to go a little cheaper at quarterback.
Well, and I agree with that. My second choice of quarterback would be Rivers, ironically, it's for an opposite reason that Joe mentioned. I think that if San Diego falls behind in the game, there's nothing wrong with that. If you got Rivers at your quarterback, probably just means he's going to have to throw the ball more. Plus, you have that injury factor. I mean, presume Matthews is going to play in this game, but he's not 100%. And they like to go away from him as soon as they start falling behind anyway, so they can throw the ball more. So that's even better for Rivers. So I think he's a solid second choice.
Yeah, I really like Rivers in the red zone as well. They seem to like to pass a lot in the red zone. So even if Matthews is healthy, I can see them passing the ball, and Rivers should be a good source of their touchdown production that game. So no one's really on Andrew Luck. Dave made a great call last week. It was on Andrew Luck, and he was one of the best plays of the week for sure. So nobody's on Andrew Luck, huh?
No, I think it was a big change in Andrew Luck's game once Brandon Flowers left the game, made it easy, made it easy for T.Y. Hilton to make plays. The Patriots are going to focus on taking Hilton out of this game. I don't think they'll have that same luxury this week.
Yeah, that would be a big concern of mine as well. Is that I can't believe how often he was able to throw the ball to Hilton last week and how open he was. And if you're able to somehow neutralize him in some way, then I think you could hold Luck down. Plus the fact that, like you said, last week's game played into Indy having to throw the ball the entire second half. I think they can compete in this game. And if they do, they wouldn't have to throw as much.
Yeah, and I think the other guys, Cam Newton, obviously a really tough matchup for him. He didn't do much in his game against San Francisco in the regular season. Neither did Kaepernick. Carolina's very good at limiting the mobile quarterbacks from running, and that's how Kaepernick got half of his points last week. So I think Kaepernick's a pretty scary play. And then Russell Wilson, of course, I think he's a scary play. Drew Brees, scary play. So, Joe, any opinion on Kaepernick and what he might do this weekend?
I think he actually will have a solid game, but, I mean, you'd be stupid to start anybody from the NFC. Those are I think those are 4 of the 5 top defenses in the league. You don't want to start those guys, but Kaepernick will have a good game.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it's you got all the top defenses stacked in those 2 games. I would stay, in general, I'd stay away from those 2 games as much as possible.
Yeah.
New Orleans is sneaky good. Yeah, those are absolutely great defenses, especially when it comes to limiting fantasy production. So let's move on to running backs then. Running backs, the way I see this is I see Frank Gore underpriced on sites like DraftKings. Frank Gore is listed 4,600 on DraftKings, and that's right around the Monte Ball range. He's cheaper than D'Angelo Williams and LeGarrette Blount. So Frank Gore is a must-play for me on sites like DraftKings. He had 100 yards against Carolina in the regular season, and he is very involved in the team's offense in the red zone. So I see this as a really good game for Gore. Solid play in cash games especially, where he's going to get you at least 10 points or so. But am I crazy for thinking that, Joe?
No, you mentioned it. He was good against Carolina, especially before Vernon left the game when they weren't keying on him as much. With Crabtree, Vernon, Carolina's a good defense, but they're going to have to pick their poison at some point now that San Francisco has all their offensive weapons.
Agreed. What do you think, Dave?
I agree. I was surprised that Gore's price was so low. He was not someone that I was really interested in, and I'm still not really interested in him. But the price makes you look at him.
Mm-hmm. Then who do you like at running back if you're not going to go with Gore?
Well, first, let's start off on a sad note. Is I can't play LeGarrette Blount in this game. I had him in the season finale as a $5,000 guy. Obviously, he had a monster game. It was shocking to me this week how much the prices have been adjusted. In the regular season NFL, the prices adjust very slowly. If LeGarrette Blount had played a regular season game last week, even coming off that monster game, he might have been 7,500, 7,800. He's over 12,000 this week. No, I think he's going to have a decent game, but no. I got to stay away from him. Both running backs that I like this week are in AFC matchups. They're on teams that I think are going to fall behind and get into a passing mode. I mentioned San Diego before. I think San Diego is the most likely of all teams this week to fall behind and have to throw the ball a lot. If, in fact, Matthews is not playing or not playing well, you're going to see Wood ahead in there almost the entire game. I think you're going to have a big pass-catching game here. Plus, what I liked about Woodhead last week against Cincinnati was that they handed the ball to him twice inside the 5-yard line. Once he scored, once he got to the 1-yard line. So, I mean, man, if they're starting to use him at the goal line a little bit as well, I just think he's a great value.
Yeah, I like him on the goal line because, as I said, they seem to love to pass at the goal line. So Woodhead's the perfect guy for that, is just have him in and single back in the shotgun with Phillip Rivers and swing him out. And if the guy's not covered, then give it to him. Otherwise they're going to look for a guy like Ladarius Green. But Joe, who are your running back plays?
Dave, you can on FanDuel you can still get a decent price on LeGarrette Blount if you like. Couple guys I can't even believe I'm saying their name. The first one is Mark Ingram. I know it's a bit of a bold call, but played very well last week. Everyone knows Seattle's got a good rush defense, but the way to attack their defense is between the tackles. That's where Ingram likes to run. I think if the Saints have a chance of winning, it's not going to be through the air. It's going to be on the ground, and I think they're going to have a big game from Ingram. The other guy I like is Donald Brown. Never thought I would say that, but suddenly he looks like Indy's second-best offensive weapon. 2 touchdowns last week. He's had a few multiple touchdown games, and like we talked about T.Y., after T.Y., he looks like their only other real playmaking threat right now.
Yeah, it is hard to trust him when he only gets 10 carries a game, but, man, is he producing with those 10 carries,
Yeah.
Well, but that's changing though. I mean, you look at last week; they handed the ball one time to Richardson. He dropped it. It was the only touch he got the whole game.
But Brown only had 11 carries.
Right, but I think he had 15
but he also
or 16.
had 4 catches, and he got a lot of work in the red zone.
That's true.
And so But that's the thing, is that when when all season long I haven't wanted to play Brown just because for some reason they insisted upon giving Richardson as many touches or almost identical. Now it's like, well, gee, the Richardson's completely out of the picture. And like we've talked about, if New England's emphasis is stopping Hilton in this game, well, who is Indy's second best threat? I would say it's Brown. And he's got a reasonable price. I actually rate him as my #1 running back this week.
Wow. Impressive. And Joe, you'd mentioned the price on LeGarrette Blount on FanDuel. What's that price?
5,600. So
5,600 there. Yeah, so that's probably the best place
or so of your salary.
Yeah, he's 5,600 on DraftKings too, but that's with a smaller cap. Dave mentioned that he's around 12,000 on draft day, so that's probably the worst place to play him. But there might be a couple spots you can throw him in there, Dave. Couple different sites.
Gore's actually a little high priced on FanDuel.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's due to the fact that he's not a great PPR guy, and FanDuel doesn't really reward a full point PPR for running back, so that increases Gore's value. But I still like Gore there. I don't think he's overpriced. He's around 7,000 on FanDuel, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So all right, wide receivers then. You've got. Obviously, the Denver guys are who everyone wants to target. It seems like those are the top 3 options, Demaryius Thomas, Eric Decker, Wes Welker, assuming he plays, which it looks like he will. And then everyone's probably going to avoid T.Y. Hilton because everyone expects New England to shut him down. So it's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how much overlap there is within the wide receiver position if everyone's going to be targeting the same guys or what, because we mentioned the tough defenses in the NFC limits who you can choose over there. So it's going to be a lot of AFC wide receivers. Do you have any NFC wide receivers you like, Joe?
I do.
I had a feeling.
Of course. I'm going to go with Michael Crabtree here.
Wait a minute. It was Bolden last week. It was Crabtree the week before.
And Crabtree was the guy. In the last 2 weeks, it was...
So we should take Bolden, right?
Take Bolden. I'm telling you right now, take Bolden, because I'm going to have Crabtree in my lineup. No, this is the week that it all changes, actually. And this is the week I finally get it right. Because, I look back on Crabtree's postseason games, and he has over 10 targets per game in the postseason. That's the guy that he really looks to in big games. So,
how's that compared to Vernon? Vernon seems to be a big target in the playoffs as well.
He is actually... He has been. I pointed that out last week.
Mm-hmm.
But those 2 guys, I think will definitely.
So they're both in play. You think they're both good options?
Yeah.
Okay.
Another guy I like is the guy who, of all the remaining receivers, had the most targets during the regular season, and that was Julian Edelman. I think, like I said, I expect the Patriots to score, and that's going to be the guy that they're mostly going to. And then I did pick a Denver receiver, and I saved a little money, and I'm going with Demaryius Thomas. The first time that Denver played San Diego, he had 10 catches for 108 yards and 3 TDs.
So you saved money on those other guys in order to get Demaryius?
I saved a little bit. I went pretty cheap at running back, and
Gotcha. Nice.
I personally don't expect Denver to just absolutely blow them out and have Peyton throw 5 touchdowns, but I think a bulk of the passes are going to go Demaryius' way.
I would expect the same thing. I don't have much statistics to back that up, but just judging Peyton Manning's interviews and the whole Manning family's interviews, they always talk about how much Peyton loves having a big wide receiver like Demaryius Thomas for the first time in his career. He hasn't really had a wide receiver like that, so I know that when it comes down to it, it's the playoffs, and he's got one guy to trust. It's probably going to be Demaryius Thomas. What do you think, Dave?
Well, I look at last week, and last week we talked about Marvin Jones as being a good play for the Bengals against San Diego. He turned out that he was. I think Decker is the equivalent this year to what Marvin Jones was last week. You guys have talked about Thomas having a big game against San Diego the first time around, but the second time around they really shut him down pretty good. And the same thing happened with A.J. Green. A.J. Green had a big game against San Diego the first meeting when they played last week. He didn't do much. So if it's, again, a situation, and San Diego won that second game, so if they go in with that same kind of game plan where they want to shut down Thomas like they did Green last week, and it worked, then I think Decker is going to be the guy who has the bigger game. It's very hard to predict Denver's wide receivers, and so one other reason that I like Decker, to be honest with you, is that his price is lower.
I was going to say, are we all sleeping on Welker then? It was considering how much Peyton loves to spread the ball around. Why not just take the cheapest one? And Wes Welker is pretty much the cheapest one on most of the sites. So, anybody got an opinion there?
Well, he's like I said, it's very hard to predict these guys.
Yeah.
He's been out of the lineup. I don't expect him, not like he's coming off a knee injury or something. I do expect him to come back and have a good game, but I wouldn't be shocked if he wasn't at his best. He's in a situation now where I'd like to see him have one big game before I trust him, with this kind of salary level. He's basically, in what I've seen, basically the same as Decker salary-wise, and I think Decker is going to have the better game.
One other thing to point out, you were mentioning that Demaryius didn't have a big game the second time that they played. The only thing, that game was played on a Thursday night, so I'll give them a pass on that. That's a whole different animal, having 4 days to prepare versus this case they have 2 weeks to prepare.
Very good point, actually. But Dave, who else do you have at wide receiver?
Well, I have Edelman as my top wide receiver. I think Joe spoke about him already. I think that's a very strong play. I think he's New England's #1 offensive force. He's had a great season. He's got a very high price, but it's not as high as Thomas. It's not as high as Hilton. And I think he could be the #1 wide receiver overall this week. So I'm going with him as a flex or a third wide receiver. I'm going to stubbornly stick with Griff Whalen of the Colts. Now, yes, I know. I had him last week. I seemed to convince you guys that he was a good play, and he had a terrible game. That said, they did throw the ball to him 6 times in that game. He only caught 2 of them. But it was for 20 some odd yards. So he almost got back the 5 points of his 5,000 salary. He's a salary that did not adjust at all this week. Not that it should have, but he's right back there at the minimum salary. If they throw him 6 balls again this week, I assure you he's going to be worth that $5,000.
Man, yeah, he just got out-physicaled in that game. Anytime there was contact, he just, lost his footing and then got bumped off, and I don't know. I mean, I guess I'll have to break down some film and see how physical New England projects to be with him, but he scares me a little bit. I think there's some really good cheap options, though. You look at Golden Tate this week. Obviously, we've talked about how New Orleans has a pretty good defense, but Golden Tate's the #1 option in this pass offense, even with Percy back if he plays a little bit. I think Golden Tate's the guy to have there. You've got a guy who's very cheap, but definitely the cheapest wide receiver 1. And I think considering that I'll probably be spending on guys like Manning and maybe spend a little more on running back, that I'm going to have to take a guy like a Steve Smith even, or a Golden Tate. So Steve Smith, a guy, again, another tough matchup. We've talked about how those NFC games are probably ones you have to avoid, but accordingly, they're cheaper. So, Joe, talk me out of a guy like Steve Smith this week.
Don't take Steve Smith.
Why?
A couple days ago, he was 71% certain to play. Then he was 57. Today, he's 81%. So
it's weird,
89%. Huh? I'm not sure exactly what it was. Yeah, the Panthers, they're not going to be able to throw the ball against the 49ers this week. I do think, go into your logic that they're going to be down, they're going to be in a big hole, so they are going to have to pass a lot. But yeah, I don't think Smith is really the guy. He's not the big play guy that he was a couple years ago.
Okay, what about a cheaper guy around that range then? Give me a guy in like the Golden Tate, Steve Smith range. Is there anyone worth playing, or do you think I just have to spend more?
I'll give you one.
You're looking at a lot of crapshoots there.
Exactly.
A lot of yeah. I mean, as a roll of the dice, that's fine. But God, I'm not too excited about that. Colston's only a little bit more expensive than Tate.
All right, Dave, give me what you got.
I'll give you Vincent Brown as a guy that minimum salary guy in a game where we're all trying to project how these games are going to go. It's the one game that I think could turn into a blowout. If it's a game where Rivers is throwing the ball 40 times, he's going to have to throw the ball to Brown, between 5 and 8 times. And the same logic as Waylon. You throw Brown the ball 6 times, he's going to catch 3 or 4 of them, get his 40 yards. Next thing you know, he's going to give you 8 to 10 fantasy points, and it's going to be, I think that's a minimum for him. And it's going to be worth the $5,000 investment.
Did he play last week though?
Yeah.
Yeah, but did he get any targets?
He plays every game. He just doesn't.
Well, that was a completely opposite type of game. I mean, that's a game.
That's true.
Diego was ahead, or in the game, or ahead the entire way. You're right. If this were a game where Vincent Brown were playing for Denver, where I expect them to get way ahead, then I wouldn't be recommending it. But I just think that if San Diego falls behind, Keenan Allen as a #1 receiver, he's a good player, but he's not someone you're going to throw the ball to 15 times.
Hey, take it easy. I like Keenan Allen.
That's actually a good line of thinking. Only I may even go with Eddie Royal.
I was going to say
all right.
Brown there.
He's questionable, but how's that? If Eddie Royal plays, do you still consider Vincent Brown, Dave?
Well, again, Royal's one of these guys that he's an all-or-nothing kind of guy, and so he makes it difficult. I will say, yes, that if he's in there and they decide this is one of those games where they're going to throw him the ball 7 times, then no, I don't want Brown in there. But if this 67% of the time where he gets 2 balls thrown to him, then I don't think out of 40 that Rivers is going to throw, I don't think that's going to impact Brown at all.
All right.
If you really like Steve Smith, he's actually minimum on FanDuel.
That's what I'm saying, man.
Just a heads up there.
No, I think he should be minimum. He's not 100%. He's going up against a very tough defense.
He should
in
be
what
minimum.
I expect to be a low-scoring game. So you guys talked before about the 49ers receivers, if I may. The problem that I have with 49ers receivers this week is twofold. Number one is that you've got these 3 guys who are sharing passes these days, and secondly, you've got a quarterback. I can't see how you could possibly project Kaepernick to throw for 250 yards this week. I mean, maybe 210, maybe 190. And if he throws for 200 yards, I don't want any of those 3 guys in my lineup.
All right, let me speak to Dave's point here a little bit.
Okay.
We talked about, I believe a little while ago, we talked about Minnesota's front court in basketball, how there's only a couple guys there that get all the rebounds. Well, Kaepernick's only thrown touchdowns to 3 different players this year. So even though it is 3 of them, he's not throwing the ball elsewhere. And I actually do believe that the Niners will have success against Carolina this week, passing the ball.
Really?
Passing the ball. The last game is kind of, in the playoffs, you really have to throw out regular season performances, how they're going to impact what's going to happen this week. It's not going to be another 10-9 game. There is going to be a good amount of scoring. You can attack. I know you can attack. The Panthers secondary, again, with Captain Munnerlyn, or if they can get Vernon Davis matched up on Mike Mitchell. Luke Kuechly can't cover him the whole game. So I think Kaepernick actually is going to surprise people and have a strong game.
Why can't Kuechly cover him the whole game?
Because then you're going to lose him in the running game. Then that's what I said earlier. You're going to have to pick your poison. He's because they're going to be able to dictate the matchups a little bit. And when they can get him matched up on someone like Mitchell, they're going to exploit that matchup.
All right, enough about it.
I heard an interesting stat.
Go ahead.
If I may. I heard an interesting stat about the 49ers schedule this year. And if you look at the 7 games they played against good defensive teams, Kaepernick in those games threw 7 touchdown passes and 8 interceptions. And in the other 9 games, I don't forget what that was, 18 touchdown passes and no interceptions. So, this is one of those tough matchups. This is not a good quarterback. We've talked all year long about how this guy looks at one receiver, doesn't check the ball down. We know that he doesn't throw the ball to the backs. And going up against these tough defenses, he has struggled all season long. And I do not see how you can project him to have a good game here.
Yeah, I'll say one more thing.
And then I'll say one more thing.
This is probably one of the worst pass defenses in the league. I don't think many people can argue about that. And
What
the Niners. You don't think the Niners are one of
Pass
the worst
offenses?
Offenses, yes. Did I say defenses? One of the worst pass offenses in the league, and a lot of that has to do with what Dave's talked about is Colin Kaepernick and his progressions, actually. So you'll notice if you break down the film that Colin Kaepernick, this has been a knock on him since he started, is not good with progressions. He's good at progressing from high to low, but not moving from the X to the Y to the Z like that, So it's been a problem. It wasn't necessarily a problem against Green Bay, but Green Bay's awful. When he's going to face Carolina here, I could definitely see it being a problem, and I would be shocked if he throws for over 200 yards. So, Joe, go ahead. You can have the last word, and we'll move on to tight ends.
Colin Kaepernick averages about 50 yards more passing in the postseason than the regular season and about 60 yards more rushing.
Okay, that's the last word now. Who's your tight end?
All right. Sticking with that game, a couple guys I like. Greg Olsen. We talked about it last week. The Niners are not good at covering tight ends for whatever reason. Patrick Willis is just a step slow. Carolina's going to be behind. They're not going to be able to pass the ball to their wideouts. They're not going to be able to run the ball effectively. Olsen's going to be their main offensive weapon. Another guy I like for a cheap price, if you're looking to save money, is Ladarius Green as an inexpensive play. Denver's terrible against tight ends. That was an awesome catch he made last week, just absolutely going up and high pointing the ball. He's a little touchdown dependent, but he's also very cheap on most sites.
Okay, Dave, who do you think?
Well, I think this is a very interesting week for tight ends because we've talked about a lot of these good defenses. I think it's the weak point of almost every one of these defenses. Seattle's not good at defending tight ends. New Orleans is terrible. New England's terrible. 49ers are like the worst team in the league, and Carolina's not good. I mean, it creates a good matchup for a lot of these guys. And so I'm not sure you have – point number one is I think you could pick any one of these guys and probably get some success. But the way I would look at it is I'm not going to spend a whole lot of money at this position because I think I can get value from a lesser guy, kind of like Joe was saying. I mean, I can see taking Olsen. I wish Green's price was a little lower, but I could see taking him. The guy I would take in this game, this weekend is Miller of Seattle. Because New Orleans is terrible at defending tight ends, and Miller had a big game against them in the regular season, and he's the lowest price of all of these guys. So I'll roll the dice with him.
For me, I narrowed it down to three guys. I narrowed it down to Jimmy Graham. He's the obvious guy because his upside is incredible. He can win you a tournament if you've got him in your lineup and some good sleepers. So I like him. I looked at Vernon Davis, but I eliminated him because of Greg Olsen. We talked about Greg Olsen, and he's cheaper than Vernon Davis, and I think the projected points are going to be very similar when I end up going through all my projections. So I think Greg Olsen's a very good play if you need to save money there, but if you somehow have the room for a Jimmy Graham, then throw him in your lineup.
I would. I actually disagree with Jimmy Graham. If you in the game last week, New Orleans' game plan was to run the ball against Philly because they didn't feel like they'd be able to pass efficiently. So Jimmy Graham was only on the field for 47 of their 72 offensive snaps. I think we're all pretty much done pretending he's an actual tight end who's going to stay in line and block. And I see that being their game plan again this week, like I mentioned earlier with Ingram. I think the way to beat the Seahawks is not just to throw into the teeth of that defense, is to keep the ball on the ground. And I think as long as they want to run the ball, Jimmy Graham's going to be on the sideline.
Dave, what do you think about Jimmy Graham?
I just think I was someone who was on him last week, unfortunately. I just think his price is too high for this game where I don't think is going to be real high scoring. He's going to have to catch a lot of balls or maybe 2 touchdowns, to justify this price. He was their highest scorer in the regular season game against Seattle, but 13.2 points only in that game. And I don't know. I don't want to spend. I'm spending a lot of money at other positions, especially at quarterback. I don't want to do it at tight end.
Yeah, the snap count percentages last week were fairly consistent with how he ended the regular season. And if you watch the game, you saw that they tried to get him the ball. They launched him the ball in the end zone a couple times. He just didn't come down with it. And eventually, if you keep doing that, he's going to come down with some. He was pretty close to having a big game. He just couldn't come down with the ball. I think the opportunities will be there again for him to do the same thing. And I really like the way it sets up with him. Obviously, you mentioned that Jimmy Graham isn't really human, so obviously snap counts and targets and everything goes out the window because you know that he has the potential to put up a 30 to 40 point game at any point. So that's what I think about that. Let's move on to our last section here. We're going to give you a couple of defenses that we're looking at. Obviously, it's very site dependent. You see the biggest fluctuation with defenses on every site as far as pricing goes. So, Joe, give me a defense you're looking at, and make sure you let me know what site you're talking about so I can find some relevance in it.
Sure. I'm going with the cheapest defense on FanDuel this week, which is the New Orleans Saints. If you look at the Seahawks, their Achilles heel the last month when they went 2-2 was their offense. They only cracked 300 yards of total offense one time in the last 4 games. I think that, like I said, defense and running the ball is how New Orleans is going to be successful. There's really, I think Lynch may have a good game, but I don't think Wilson will be able to pass effectively against that defense.
Yeah, I think Lynch could have a good game, but typically if you're running the ball a lot, you're draining the clock the whole time, and it's going to be a little lower scoring. So I can buy into that. And the Saints are actually fairly consistently the lowest price option across the industry. So I think that's the best punt play out there. What do you think, Dave?
Well, I agree. I mean, when I looked at the defenses, I identified the 49ers and the Saints, the 49ers being the highest price and the Saints being the lowest price. And as I got down to the end, turns out I had enough money to play the 49ers. So I would say if you have the money, I would play the 49ers defense in this game. Steve Smith is banged up. Carolina doesn't have that much of a passing game. Newton can be erratic, and say what you want about Carolina likes to run the ball. That doesn't mean that they're necessarily good at it, especially against a defense like the 49ers. I just think I don't see how Carolina's going to score 14 points in this game. That's not to say they couldn't win the game. They've already won once by scoring less than that. But if I can predict anything about this game, it's that Carolina's offense is not going to be the reason why they're competitive or why they win.
Yeah, I agree. I think if I have the money, I'm spending on the Niners, but I'm not going to worry too much about it, and I'll probably just use the Saints if all else fails. So, all right, guys, thanks. I'm going to give you guys a chance to throw in a last word, maybe make a final argument about a player or a story or a synopsis of your lineup, whatever you want. Joe, last words.
Last words. My lineup this week, just to go over one more time. Tom Brady, Mark Ingram, Donald Brown, Michael Crabtree, Julian Edelman, Demaryius Thomas, Greg Olsen, Nick Novak, and the Saints defense. Niners win in a blowout. Saints pull out. Victory on the road.
There you go. What about you, Dave?
Well, my advice would be stay away from the 2 NFC games, which I think are going to be 2, defensive battles, not necessarily 10-9 games, but kind of similar to last week, where there's, the scores are barely reaching the 20s, if that, and if they do, then there won't be enough points to go around in that game. Do yourself a favor, find room for Peyton Manning in the lineup, because if your opponents are playing NFC players and you've got Peyton Manning in the lineup, you've got a big head start over them.
Yeah, my advice is going to be similar. It's in your cash games, in your 50-50s, in your heads-up games, make sure you have Manning. Don't get cute, If you're going to lose, you want Manning in the lineup. But there's enough value out there, especially we talked about tight end and defense, of course, but to be able to save money and fit him in your lineup. So guys like Gore, too, are a really good option. I feel like he's a must-play on certain sites and a very good play on other sites. But I think Frank Gore is a guy that's almost guaranteed to have 100 yards. So anyway, I want to thank you guys for coming on, and thank you for everyone who watched, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for having me.
Hey.